Hey, welcome to today's show. We're going to get you covered for the playoff edition of the Waiver Wire. Obviously, week one of the playoffs. Hopefully, you are in the playoffs. If you're not in that kind of league, you need to leave it, obviously, at the end of the season. But certainly don't wait for the playoffs until week 18. We got you covering all those guys and more. Stick around. Welcome to the Tuesday, December 13th edition of the RotoWire Fantasy Football Podcast, brought to you by No House Advantage. I'm Joe Bartel. You can follow me at JB Fantasy Sports along with Jake Letarski every week at RotoJakes Day. We're running down top waiver wire pickups for week 15, first week of the playoffs for a lot of people, maybe discussing some playoff strategies. We'll answer some of the questions that come in as well, too. And I can say that because the Monday Night Football game, not all that important other than all the injuries that happened and possibly messed up people.
I would argue that this is one of the most consequential Monday Night Football games we've had all season.
Not for good reasons.
Not for good reasons. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, so chances are you were kind of a fringe playoff team if you were relying on Kyler Murray all year. I know that was the case in one of my leagues because, he missed some time earlier in the year due to injury. But this one looks bad. I mean, you feel for the guy. You could, of course, the cameras caught him in tears in the tunnel, and that's when you know it's bad right off the bat, right? And I don't know if they've officially put it out, but it looks like significant knee damage for Kyler Murray. So we have a giant laundry list of quarterback situations that we can go over this week. I think we're going to see about a third of the teams in the whole league change quarterback or potentially change quarterback. And we'll get to all of that here. But, tough break for Murray. Of course, he wasn't the only injury, though, right?
Yeah, Ramondre Stevenson, Deebo Samuel, T. Higgins, all guys that could be affecting your fantasy playoffs. So.
I was talking about the only injury in the Monday night game. really, right? Because Ramondre Stevenson, obviously, he was in and out. He came back in, then he was down, and then he's off. James Conner, he was in and out, but at least it seems like he finished the game. He was limping to the sidelines a couple of times. Devontae Parker, very early in the game, left with a head injury. That looks like a concussion. Hats off to, was it Nelson Aguilar that alerted the officials there, because Parker got up all wobbly, and I don't know what the spotter was doing, maybe having a smoke break or a bathroom break, but he was all wobbly. Nobody saw it, and Parker's lined up like half on the line of scrimmage, and Aguilar gets him out of there. So good for him. And then, some injuries on the defensive side too, but injuries were definitely the story of Monday Night Football.
Yeah, let's get to the whole recap of that. First, a word from our sponsors, No House Advantage. No House Advantage is changing the game by offering the most dynamic fantasy sports platform available today, playing pick'em contests versus other people for a shot at winning big cash prizes. Download the app, choose a contest, select your player props, earn points for correct picks, and then climb the leaderboard for a shot at hundreds of thousands of dollars every week. You can also test your skills versus the house and 20 extra entry. If you hit all your picks, bet on up to 5 player props, over-unders, or individual player matchups across every major sports league, including NFL, NBA, MLB, PGA, MMA, and NASCAR SAP with promo code NHWIRE. That's NHAWIRE at No House Advantage, or download the app on the App Store to get a first deposit match up to $25. Make sure to check out No House Advantage today and experience daily fantasy sports redefined. It's not just how you play, but also where you play. You won't want to miss out on this. All right, you had mentioned it. Patriots ended up getting the critical playoff win for them, 27-13. Wasn't a really competitive game for much of the second half after the Patriots defense took care of the DeAndre Hopkins fumble, returned it for a touchdown. And that was in large part a big catalyst for the Patriots win, was their defense overall. Mac Jones, once again, proved to be inept, and this should have been a good spot for him. Still didn't look very good. From the Cardinals' perspective, James Conner.
I wish they'd show more of Mac Jones shouting at Matt Patricia on the sideline, because it was funny when I remember way back to the beginning of the season when we were doing our early over-unders, and I took the over on the Pats and you were on the under, but the main reason being Matt Patricia can't coach. And I'm like, well, Belichick's going to figure it out. But if Mac Jones isn't afraid to just bark back at him after every decision, and there's not going to be consequences for that, then, good for Mac Jones, I guess. But no, you're right. Defense, absolutely the story of this game here on Monday night. Obviously, Kyler Murray gets knocked out early. It's pretty demoralizing, right? Given, the scene around there in general. But Colt McCoy was able to, he's experienced. He's a starter. He's led this offense, in the past, even this season. And he was able to lead a drive. And actually, the Cardinals had a 13-10 lead at halftime. Then they ended up losing the game 27-13. And the reason for that, of course, is the Patriots defense. I think 6 sacks when it was all said and done. Colt McCoy certainly looks very capable. I don't think that DeAndre Hopkins, I don't think that Hollywood Brown are going to lose much fantasy value period, I think James Conner might gain some fantasy value from this whole situation here. That's very possible because, McCoy is going to be less likely to take off, and scramble and more likely to, to throw it up or maybe throw it in a tight situation. Anyway, we'll see. So, fantasy wise, that doesn't seem too bad. And he's actually a decent quarterback rest of season, provided this offensive line can keep him upright. Like I said, 6 sacks. The Hopkins fumble was just like, it was like a mental lapse by Hopkins. He's one hand in the ball out here like this, and he just, So I don't know what that is. And, he was off. He was like, it's on me. So, despite this, I guess, shellacking in the second half the offense took, I'm still optimistic. Now the Cardinals' playoff hopes, if they're all but evaporated, what kind of motivation does that have for the rest of the season? But I'm counting on a lot of these guys, especially DeAndre Hopkins and James Conner, to lead me to some fantasy football titles.
Yeah, we have been talking off air, and I'm curious if the Cardinals choose to switch away from Colt McCoy to end the season, given, like you mentioned, they're out of playoff contention. At the moment, Trace McSorley is the only other backup. There's practice squad calls. I don't think you change things for Trace McSorley. Yeah,
exactly. There's no guy. You don't develop Trace McSorley this late in the season.
No.
That's what I asked. My first question was like, well, who are you going to develop? I mean, they clearly put a lot of stock in Kyler Murray. He's their guy. You might as well just throw out there and play for a worse draft pick with Colt McCoy. So
yeah, well, I mean, you could accomplish that with Trace McSorley too, but I think I don't think you want the rails to fall completely off. There's a point. These are all still competitors where you don't want to.
Well, yeah. I mean, Kingsbury is going to be in a situation where he needs to. You think he's gone?
Oh, he and Keim, their GM, might both be fired despite getting contract extensions to begin this offseason. But there's no way.
I don't
Cliff
believe that.
this.
I don't believe that. He has plausible deniability given the Murray injury.
They looked bad before.
They look bad, and the defense is the issue. But Murray missed enough games, and especially this injury, I think is going to buy him some leeway.
Yeah, it might have been the best case scenario for Cliff Kingsbury, which is sad to say.
But hey, if anything, Kingsbury, that's a terrible way to put it. But no, if anything, Kingsbury coaching for his self-respect will maybe help these fantasy guys stay useful. We'll briefly touch on the Patriots side. A few things happened there. Nelson Aguilar looked pretty good. I mean, volume-wise, he had 10 targets. That's noteworthy. We'll discuss that below with Jacoby Myers banged up. And Devontae Parker, given it's a short week, he's almost certainly going to be in protocol with the way things have been going this year. And then on top of that, of course, Ramondre Stevenson goes out. Damian Harris was doubtful to begin with. Kevin Harris and Pierre Strong split the backfield workload. Each of them scored a touchdown this week, but I don't really have him highlighted in our running back section because we don't know how hurt Stevenson is yet, I believe. And then there's also Damian Harris, apparently could have came back this week, was a little bit close here. So definitely monitor that situation. Another decent game for Hunter Henry, too. He's going to be hit or miss in this tight end landscape, but he was definitely far above average this week when you're talking about tight ends this year.
Yeah, I was surprised because we had Jacoby Myers not play. He was inactive for this contest. So was Damian Harris. And the thought is, okay, so if Ramondre Stevenson misses time, Damian Harris is going to get some work. I'm not positive that's the case, but it's going to be a complicated backfield where I do think Kevin Harris and Pierre Strong do some of the receiving stuff, and Damian Harris gets some of those carries. And because of that, like you mentioned, it's hard to really recommend one of those guys over the other.
Yeah, exactly. And I don't know, going back to Ramondre, I don't know for sure if him coming back into the game is a good sign or a bad sign. One, that he felt good enough to come back in the game, or the other side of that is that he came back in the game and possibly hurt himself worse. So we'll have to monitor his practice status because your Stake League points champion after 14 weeks has been riding Ramondre Stevenson, a very a nice cheap late buy that has been on the roster all year. So, we'll have to see about that. But it's definitely something that'll come in on Thursday.
Nelson Aguilar might be more actionable, although Jacoby Myers should be back. I think he was also with a concussion too, and that's why he didn't practice all week. I thought Kendrick Bourne was going to get more of the slot opportunities, and that wasn't the case. It was Nelson Aguilar that kind of took that over. And remember, they have Tyquan Thornton, who looked really good in the preseason, then got injured, was out for much of the beginning half, came back at an explosive play. Like, it's possible that they get mixed in.
Game, and he did have 5 targets here, so I guess we never know. But that's another possibility. But it is tough to rely on Patriots receivers.
Are we good to move on to the actual waiver wire recommendations here?
Yes, I think we are good to move on.
All right, so no more bye weeks. That's the good news. We are finally past that point. If you survived Bye-Mageddon 2 and made it to the playoffs, kudos. Hopefully you are not dealing with a quarterback situation. And that's the hard part, is because you've mentioned almost a third of the teams might be waffling at quarterback or having to do some sort of thing due to injury or the team context like Rodgers and Jordan Love. hopefully you're not in the playoffs if you have one of those quarterbacks, because that's the other,
Mhm.
none of these are really great spots. That's the unfortunate issue.
So I mean, maybe if you're in a 16-team super flex, there's actually going to be guys available this week, or like our 14-team dynasty where everyone's holding 3-4 quarterbacks. There might actually be guys available, so we're going to run them all down the best we can. And I don't want to stress Colt McCoy too much, but I think I would argue that he's arguably the top pickup for the rest of the season out of all these guys that we're talking about, because one, we know he's the starter of the rest of the season. Two, upcoming schedule, okay, he's at Denver, which is really tough. They're second best against opposing quarterbacks. So if you're streaming this week and this week alone, or maybe you decide to stream the rest of the season, you don't grab McCoy yet, but he finishes versus Tampa Bay, middle of the pack, and at Atlanta, pretty good matchup there in the fantasy football championship. So, there's a lot of names that we're going to talk about, and I think he is right up there with the top ones.
I mean, it's tough because that Broncos one, can you really recommend starting him against the Broncos? No, but otherwise, I think there's possibility for it.
Yeah. Now let's look at the other side of that matchup this week here. Russell Wilson is in concussion protocol here. Brett Ripien, or however we're saying it. I only caught it. Yeah, I only caught it glancingly on Red Zone, but he's a decent 2-quarterback league stream. The Cardinals are a great matchup for opposing quarterbacks, and he seems to have some chemistry with Jerry Jeudy. That's for sure. So that's given me actually a real tough situation. Maybe we'll talk about some dilemmas at the end. Jerry Jeudy actually being good. I was forced to start him last week, but now with Christian Watson being back, it's like, okay, what do I do now? But anyway, so yeah, Brett Ripien, fine again as a streamer against the Cardinals. Probably not a playoff team starter in a single quarterback league, but definitely 2 QB league viable because he was probably dropped after Russ came back.
Yeah, for sure. Then there was the news that occurred last week, which was the Falcons, who aren't out of playoff contention, but are, I think, making the right call and switching QBs, are looking at Desmond Ridder for the rest of the season.
Yeah, he's only 4% rostered in Yahoo formats. Okay, rest of season schedule. Actually, a pretty good rest of season schedule. It's the Saints and then the Ravens and then the Cardinals in the fantasy football championship. Of course, he has some rushing upside. I still don't feel confident about rolling out a rookie in the fantasy playoffs. I'd probably feel better, especially this week. If you look at his matchup against New Orleans, I'd probably feel better going after McCoy or Ripien. But or there's a couple other guys I like too that are just general streamers that we can roll with. But we do need to keep you posted on Desmond Ridder because it looks like he's the guy.
I think Ridder is, if I'm picking up any one of these for a super flex, I'm going to roll the dice on Ridder, give him potential, scheme fit as well too. I mean, we have been mentioning Marcus Mariota as a pickup every single week because of the upside that he gives you with the rushing floor. It's the same type of athletic profile for Ridder, maybe not quite as fast as Mariota, but Mariota's been in the league for 8 or 9 years, so there's going to be a down. I don't mind Ridder. The only issue is no Kyle Pitts. Drake London is your number one target and has been.
I'm worried. Drake London has been coming on lately with Mariota,
sure, and
I'm worried if that pattern is going to continue at all with Ridder. Just a shakeup, nothing terribly against Ridder, but it's a slightly different set of skills. So we'll see how that goes.
Like you weren't able to consistently rely on Drake London for much of the season, and even though he's done better now, I can't erase that, so I can't say I'm playing him at this point.
Fair enough.
I don't know if Ridder changes that, but here's another part. This is the 4th QB of, well, if you're in a super flex league, maybe that matters. Let's add another one, which was Baker Mayfield and his historics against the Raiders on Thursday night, which people are going to forget about. 2 days comes in. Man. I mean, that's a pretty impressive performance.
Yeah, I watched that Thursday night game, and I don't know if I'm going to forget about that for a while because,
17-16 game. All right.
Yep. I was ready to, I don't know if I'm changing my mind, but I remember thinking during that game, man, I was ready to just completely discount Baker as a fantasy and real life quarterback option and, count him out and mentally move on. And now suddenly he's someone that you could see taking a stab at in a 2-quarterback league. He's at the Packers on Monday night. Then he's got Denver again. Denver's showing up in all of these. They're a tough matchup on opposing quarterbacks generally. And then Baker in the championship game has the Chargers. So again, you'll notice the pattern here. I'm putting the upcoming schedule here because I want to see them through the playoffs, and we'll do that throughout all our position groups today pretty much. So Baker's fair, but he wouldn't make my top 3 this week.
Yeah, I'm still out on Baker Mayfield. I know that was an impressive performance, and 2 days of knowing the scheme, whatever, great. Pretty convinced that he's not the guy. And more importantly, it's the weapons that the Rams do or do not have. I'm just not convinced that's going to matter. The Packers one, though, if you're saying which one of these crap guys am I starting this week, Joe Barry defense, yes, fire that up. I will gladly say fantasy points will happen against Joe Barry's defense, right?
I like I said, I don't think he makes my top 3 for this week or rest of season, but again, he's on the list.
That'd be the worst Culver's board bet of all time, so we'll avoid that. Brock Purdy was injured. Of course, he's now had 2 pretty good relief appearances. I guess he started this past week with the oblique. It doesn't sound like it's serious. It sounds like Brock Purdy's going to play.
It's going to be fun.
If that's the case, though, Josh Johnson is your backup. Kyle Shanahan was not worried, I guess I'd say, yesterday when they were going over.
The only thing is they have a Thursday game, right? Yep. And he's limited on Monday's practice estimate, consider day-to-day. So, again, just more of a bullet point than actual evidence here. Similar with the Ravens, right? Because Tyler Huntley went into concussion protocol. We know how that's gone this season. Yep. Anthony Brown is next up. But then there's Lamar kind of lingering in the background. What do we know about Lamar? How bad is the knee injury? Is he going to be ready to return? So there is some, there's something going on in Baltimore, but I'd be lying if I told you I knew what that was right now.
Yeah, concussions all across the board. So there's Tyler Huntley. Then there was Kenny Pickett, who got knocked out. Mitchell Trubisky comes into the game, against the Panthers, against the Raiders, against the Ravens to end the season. I would imagine once Kenny Pickett is good to go, they will put him back in because they invested a first-round pick.
Yeah, absolutely,
but it's very possible Trubisky plays this week against the Panthers. They did do better than I would have thought against the Seahawks this past week, so maybe it's an improving defense.
They came out to play, and the Panthers actually got themselves they're fully in playoff contention after the Bucs kind of laid a turd on in the late games on Sunday. So Trubisky's okay. That actually gives me a dilemma because I think Deontay Johnson's a little better with Trubisky, and he now suddenly Deontay Johnson's starting to become on my flex radar in a 10-team league. It's going to be him or Olave, and Olave's been bad with Dalton going on. So again, dilemmas created by all of this stuff here. One guy who I would pick up if I knew for sure he was going to play, and I don't know if I've noted otherwise yet, and that's Mike White. He was knocked out of the Jets game multiple times. God, did he take a beating in Buffalo? Just you could see him getting the wind knocked out of him, and him doing that. That'll make a fun noise in the microphone. Doing that on the sidelines. I don't know if you caught any of that, but he was taking shots, man, and his team's behind him. But anyway, he's home against the Lions if he's healthy and playing. And of course, we'll see what the weather looks like over there. But he's the guy, and I actually like him as a stream if I can. But what happens if they find something in the MRI or something with Mike White and he can't play? What did the Jets do? They are a playoff team. Zach Wilson has clearly lost that locker room. I shouldn't say they are a playoff team yet, but they're a team with high playoff aspirations and definite potential. You have to go with Flacco, right? Because he was far more effective early in the season when Zach Wilson was gone. So I don't know if the Jets are serious about the playoffs, and if Saleh makes the right decision, he'll roll Flacco. But whoever it is, Mike White or Flacco, against the Lions this week, I'm definitely considering them as one of the top stream options.
So and you mentioned Matt Ryan too. I don't know if they're going to really make that switch necessarily, although he did look bad.
He looked horrific. People don't remember that.
I think we would have known during the bye week if the Colts were going to go back. And we watched Sam Ehlinger for a couple of weeks. We also know he sucks too. So to me, I'm not interested. How are you ranking these guys? I actually think my order is far different than yours. I'm curious.
Yeah. I think you're higher on Desmond Ridder than me. And the tough part, to go back to Ridder, which is why I leave him off of this. I know he's got rest of season. It's his job there. But I worry about them only letting him throw the ball 15 times a game in a similar sense, like the week 1 through 3 Justin Fields. And there's upside in the unknown and rookie potential. There's upside there. But I don't know if I want to lean on that going into the fantasy football playoffs. So I'm much more comfortable taking the 15 points I get from Colt McCoy, who I rank at the top. Mike White, assuming he plays, I rank number 2 this week. So these are I should separate them for this week and rest of season, but this is kind of a rest of season ranking in mine. So McCoy, I put at the top. I put Mike White next. That's assuming he plays this week. Then I throw in Tannehill at the Chargers. He's going to get Traylon Burks back, most likely. We saw the emergence of Chigi this week, which is fantastic. And then, number 4, I wrote Mac Jones because he's at the Raiders this week, and that's a pretty decent matchup. And maybe some of his weapons get healthier. We'll see. But I'm going with the surefire 15 points which I think you can almost say about all of those guys instead of the 5 to 25 point range that Ritter gives you, I guess, is, and maybe that depends on what the rest of your roster and what the rest of your lineup looks like. How many chances do you have to take if you're way behind against the powerhouse? But I'm going safety, and that's why my rankings look like that. How about you?
Okay, so Mike White for sure, and we had been arguing the last 2 weeks, both you and I guess petitioning because we weren't arguing about it. Mike White is the rest of season guy given the schedule, provided he's healthy. So let's just clarify that. I actually think this week, and I'm more focused on this week because if you are in a spot where you're considering any of these guys, it is a this week and we move on streaming spots. I don't care about what Colt McCoy's week 18 against the Falcons is. Can he help me win this week? No, is my answer. I don't think against the Broncos I feel comfortable at all. I would rather play Baker Mayfield. I would rather play Brock Purdy. I would rather play Ryan Tannehill. I would rather play Mac Jones. I mean, there's 6 or 7 guys that I'm taking over Colt McCoy this week. And I would play Ritter over Colt McCoy, but I would also play all 6 of those 7 of those guys that I mentioned over Ritter as well too. So it's a hard spot at this point.
So let me put a scenario out there because I think some of our listeners might find themselves in this. Let's say you're in the playoffs and you have a solid guy as your starter, Herbert, Mahomes, whatever, and you have an extra spot on your bench. There's some dead weight, whether it's Mariota, whether it's someone that you can cut, you don't need your second defense, what have you. Then in that case, the pick is probably Desmond Ritter to sit on your bench because he's sitting on your bench anyway, and he has the highest ceiling out of all of these guys, right?
You don't want to Justin Fields out.
Yeah, so again, you could pick a guy up who gets 8 points a week the rest of the way, and then that killed your bench. But you don't want somebody else to. What if let's just crazy hypothetical. What if Ritter's next 3 weeks are like the Justin Fields 3-week MVP stretch? Right. That's not outside the realm of possibility entirely because of a somewhat similar style of play. So you grab him for your bench to block the other person, but if you need to use someone, this week, I'm definitely looking elsewhere.
I think that's a really good context to provide. And again, what you are deeming as like bench fodder, I think is really important. And you have to assess your roster and lineup before that occurs. But that Ritter has the most potential. I still think Mike White, it's the same concept where you could maybe play Mike White and get a start out of that. So I will block somebody from doing so. But it's a tough call. So we've spent a lot of time on quarterbacks that don't really matter. Let's take a word from our sponsors, Blue Wire. If you're the video audience, obviously we'll be right back. Audio audience, stick around after this. Okay, so talking running backs, we had mentioned Cam Akers, Zonovan Knight, who I did drop in a league thinking there's no way that was going to happen. Boy, I looked foolish there.
I started Michael Carter in a league.
Yeah, that doesn't work either. Tyler Algier, James Cook is still there. Then there was that weird Seahawks combo. Turns out didn't matter at all, even though we had kind of correctly guessed it when DJ Dallas and Kenneth Walker didn't play. Jordan Mason still there too. Khalil Herbert, probably the most interesting one. And I would still say check your injury reserve, check your waiver wire if he is available. Could be coming back as soon as this week as well.
So to start things off, just sticking with the same theme that I was doing with quarterbacks, there are some players that are probably going to get 5-6 points this week that we're going to go over. The running back pool is incredibly shallow. But that being said, you don't need a guy to pick up and start this week for the running backs, and you're just trying to bolster your bench with high upside guys. Personally, I think the move is Josh Kelly out of all these guys that we're going to talk about. Get your Eckler handcuff and insurance just in case, right? Because if you don't need to start Chuba Hubbard this week, for example, I think Kelly might actually be a more valuable add. But Chuba Hubbard was the first name that I put on this list. He's only 33% rostered in Yahoo formats. He was the far more efficient back than Deontay Foreman or Ramon Blackshear this week. Again, I don't expect Carolina to lead a ton of games the rest of the way out. I think this whole playoff situation with them is a little bit exaggerated. I said Ramon, it's Raheem Blackshear. Sorry, I knew it was an R name. But the thing is while Hubbard looked pretty good this week, he's more likely to lose touches to Blackshear than Foreman is. Foreman's your between the tackles guy, I think, and these other guys are. Chuba Hubbard, you can pick him up. He can go ahead and get you some fantasy points, maybe useful for PPR. But the thing is Deontay Foreman had 21 carries in this game here, and they were ahead. They took a lead on the Seahawks. That was interesting. But either way, the next two matchups are Pittsburgh and Detroit. They're both at home for Carolina. again, it's a desperation flex, or if you lost Ramondre and Rashallo already, Chuba is a guy that you could pick up and count on for a couple of points, but you're not excited about it, is what I'm saying.
Yeah, it's hard. I mean, is this Panthers team going to continue to have leads? I would have said no this past week, and yet they literally were out from the word go on that side.
But when they don't have leads,
that's where Chuba Hubbard's valuable.
Exactly, because then there's no. I would be shocked if Deontay Foreman had another 20 carry game this season, and even in Foreman's 20 carry game, Chuba he was more efficient. He looked pretty good. So of course Blackshear sniped that touchdown towards the end there, but I mean, if you need to start this week, I put Chuba Hubbard at the top because.
Okay, so this actually tees up a really good question, Jake. We had a user, Gibbs. We have to get a couple of those Z's in there. Ask, which pickup do you want to have, Deonta Foreman or Zonovan Knight?
I take Bam Knight.
Okay, so
I mean, Bam Knight's around 60%, so he's outside our threshold, but he's the top running back pickup if you can get him. I mean, if we're gonna go into that type of depth, look at J.K. Dobbins. He's only 70% rostered. Mm-hmm. There's almost a third of leagues where J.K. Dobbins is out there, and he looked phenomenal this week. We'll see what's going on with this quarterback situation and whatnot, but he was the guy that I picked up while he was on IR. Unfortunately, I'm really happy that I stashed him because I think he's going to be pretty effective here. So, I mean, if we're talking about if Bam Knight's still available, might as well look at J.K. Dobbins too. But yeah, Dobbins would be number one, Bam Knight number two, than anybody else we're talking about here.
I agree as well. As somebody that cut Zonovan Knight, I was pretty convinced he wasn't going to be a factor. He certainly was. I think he'll continue to be. Whereas Foreman, especially with how he's yielding those passing opportunities to Chuba Hubbard, makes me a little more skittish. So I didn't even catch this. Can you break me down? Dameon Pierce, got injured during the game with the Texans. Obviously, that was the near win for the 11-1 Texans, overcoming the vaunted Cowboys and Mike McCarthy. Sure, they're going to do great in the playoffs. Tech Harry was trying to convince me that. You watched this past week, and I disagree with that notion. So Dameon Pierce got injured. There's Dara Ngubawale, who we know very well as Mass and UW fans here. Mm-hmm. More of the receiving threat, but so is Rex Burkhead, and obviously Rex Burkhead
is suddenly their goal line guy now.
I don't.
So here's what's going on.
Rex Burkhead.
Yeah, here's what's going on. As of this morning, we have latest news on RotoWire. Dameon Pierce suffered a relatively mild high ankle sprain and could miss 1 to 2 weeks. So the H word, the high word, was in there. So you worry about that, even though it's relatively mild. Honestly, Pierce might be a cut for me now that I'm reading that, because week 17 he's playing the Jags, so maybe he comes back and does good there. But there's a decent chance Pierce could be a cut for me. In any case, it's a terrible team, terrible offense. Davis Mills, Kyle Allen, doesn't matter. It's brutal, and and of course we have Brandon Cooks and Nico Collins, both sideline. Who knows if they're going to come back, if or when they're going to come back. But again, if you're looking for a running back that's going to get some touches, you can count on for 5-6 fantasy points. I think you look to Rex Burkhead first, and then Daria Gumbawale. I mean, both could be looked at in a similar light. But I only say Burkhead because of the possibility of a goal line carry, because he is their goal line back technically without Dameon Pierce here.
Just incredible.
They cut Benjamin yesterday. I'm not quite sure what's up with that because remember when the Cardinals cut him and under kind of weird circumstances
after starting the previous 3 weeks.
Yeah, he started for 3. I don't know. Maybe there's something going on in the locker room there. But anyway, Benjamin is not in the picture, and they've got Rex and Daria. I'm sure they bring someone up from the practice squad that would be a little inconsequential for me. But, Dameon Pierce owners, I guess you go to Burkhead, but again, you don't feel great about it. You're probably looking, like I teased, the wide receivers are big this show. And if you're flexing a running back before, chances are you're flexing a wide receiver this week.
Well, yeah, and it's, again, the Dobbins, Damien Harris as well got more relevant with the Patriots news. The Zonovan Knights, the Deonta Foremans are highly rostered, but possibly still available. Mm-hmm. And when you get down to the droves of this situations, the Dara and Gubali's and Rex Burkheads, and I would argue really Matt Breida and Gary Brightwell too, with what happens with Saquon Barkley. Yep. These are just like complicated situations that, unfortunately, as we do the Tuesday podcast, probably won't get resolved till Thursday or Friday.
Yeah, exactly. And Damien Harris 50% when I checked last night. I would probably roll the dice on him over anybody other than Dobbins and Knight. I mean, right. the rest of the season schedule at the Raiders versus the Bengals versus Miami. Hopefully Ramondre Stevenson is okay. I've got some shares where I'm definitely hoping that he's okay. But I don't know. Damien Harris could come in and be impactful as well.
Yeah, it's a hard spot to be in if you really are trying to treasure trove some of these running backs. And the Seahawks situation, we had talked a lot last week, kind of unfolded the way we did, although none of those guys were super relevant. And now being a Thursday night game, too, it's possible to do this again.
I forget who started this trend, but wasn't there a reporter that said Tony Jones was going to start and get the majority of the work?
Yep.
That turned out to be completely false. It was Travis Homer, and he dominated the snaps and the touches, but very inefficient and didn't take advantage of an excellent matchup. And this situation is another one that I wouldn't really make a call on until Friday or Saturday. I mean, Homer can be dropped, if Gainwell or even if one of those other guys comes back, because it's too big of a split to be interesting.
Yeah, Boston Scott got his typical touchdowns to the Giants like he does every single time they play.
I don't know if that was blowout nature, but it looks like if you were rostering Gainwell still, and he could still be useful in the event of a Sanders injury, but it looks like Boston Scott's the backup there.
Marlon Mack also with the Broncos. I mean, we had to have this conversation 3 weeks ago when we had the Melvin Gordon release and everything else, and it feels like there's no, like, do you really want to play Latavius Murray in the playoffs? It's a hard spot to
Latavius Murray, I would consider.
You're not happy about doing it, is what I'm saying, and Marlon Mack is at that point. I will point out Joshua Kelly had the most snaps he's had the entire year this past week in that win over the Raiders, 32. They used to be platooning that backup spot with Sonny Michel and Kelly. It's very clearly Kelly now.
If you're just tuning in now, what I said at the very beginning of the running back section was, here are a bunch of junk guys that'll get you 5-6 points if you need desperately a starter this week. If you don't need a starter and are just making your bench the best it can be, Josh Kelly's the one that you add, I think, because he has got the highest ceiling rest of season. He could go, again, I don't want to wish this on anyone, and I very much need Austin Eckler to lead me to the Stake League title this year. But Kelly could go to a top 15 running back if something were to happen on any given week. So for that reason, he'd be the man. Now, I put a few cuts down, but really I only wrote down Dontrell Hilliard because he has a neck injury, and I wanted it, as an excuse to talk about Chestnut here, because it looks like Chestnut is probably the new Derrick Henry handcuff, and that's relevant for some people here. So, we'll see how that goes.
Let's get to those receivers, right? I mean, how do you want to structure this? Because there are so many that you could possibly start, and it feels like you have a clear tier.
I have a line of distinction where I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 names. The first two of those first two are pretty, are guys that we've talked about significantly in the past. So we'll breeze through them pretty quick here. And then there are some names where I don't really trust them in the fantasy playoffs, but if you're in a really deep league or you're desperate, similar to the running backs, they're guys that might be able to get you somewhere.
Okay, so Nelson Aguilar at the top of which one of those lists for you?
I don't know if Nelson Aguilar is at the top, but he is definitely in the startable in the playoff situation here. I would put him there. We talked about this situation at length. We expect Devontae Parker to be out. Myers will probably be back, but Nelson Aguilar with 10 targets, I'm not ignoring that.
No, I agree with you. How about the guy that exploded now for 2 past weeks here, DJ Shark? I guess the revenge game against the Jaguars the week before wasn't an explosion, but this one certainly was against the Vikings, who Vegas correctly identified as favorites, despite being the lopsided record difference.
With the Lions being the favorites.
That's what I'm saying, yes.
Yeah, exactly. We had anyway. But no, DJ Shark is only 41% rostered. He's last handful of weeks. He just keeps getting better and better since returning from injury. So that leads me to believe that he is healthy. And the snap share tells a really big story here. I mean, Amon-Ra 86.8%, DJ Shark 85.3%. If you were thinking about Jameson Williams, 19.1%, compared to 60% for Josh Reynolds. So DJ Shark is wide receiver 2. He is a service. It's a little bit of a tough matchup against the Jets this week, but he should definitely be rostered. And he falls into that I could stomach flexing him in the playoffs category.
I completely agree with you on that. Hey, our boy Romeo Doubs possibly back after the bye week. Right now we have Christian Watson emerging from the Packers. Randall Cobb is healthy. The Packers still have a playoff shot, which means Aaron Rodgers is still going to be starting, we think. And it's against a Rams defense that's been vulnerable. He looked okay against Devontae Adams and company last Thursday, but different situation coming to Lambeau with Baker Mayfield, theoretically a bit more practice time. I don't know. What's your thoughts on the Packers passing this?
Yeah, so Dobbs is one of those guys that I put in the possible playoff start situation. I assume on Monday night that Jalen Ramsey is going to be tasked with Christian Watson, the rookie's sensation. I don't know that for sure. But I feel that it's going to go that way. And Dobbs had the advantage earlier in the season. He was a very wide receiver 3 flex guy, absolutely within reason to do that on a week-to-week basis here. But that was largely because of all the injuries. He was kind of in a last man standing situation. I mean, now they have Watson breaking out, Cobb is back, Allen Lazard is still around, and he's going to lead the snap counts among wide receivers because of his downfield blocking abilities. So, but Dobbs is someone that is worth taking a shot on to see if he gets anywhere near the kind of volume that he was getting before.
Okay. How else? How do you want to attack the rest of this overall? Which guys?
Okay, I'll just, since we started by talking about the guys who I think are startable in the playoffs, I'll run through the rest. Obviously, Donovan Peoples-Jones, 58% rostered.
I just wanted to tee you up for that. This is your guy. This is your triumphant mention.
I know. I've been saying this for days. Now, granted, I caught a little bit of a break. I was a little bit worried about his volume when Njoku came back. Then we get the information that Amari Cooper is going to be on a pitch count with his injury here. But either way, Peoples-Jones, the question is, will Watson have chemistry with Peoples-Jones? That was one of my few uncertainties. He does. They connect, and he's got a great rest of season scheduled. 58% rostered, though, so just misses our threshold there. Also, have to look at Chris Moore, who saved me in our staff dynasty league this week. I had like 8 people on bye and picked up my 2 pickups to flex were Chris Moore and Richie James, Joe.
Oh, wow. Richie James, too, at the touchdown,
I had a stroke of genius starting. You know how hard the waiver wire is in that league. And I had a stroke of genius there with Chris Moore. He was second in snap share and top in targets for Houston, 11 targets, more than twice as many as any other Houston player. He finished with 10 catches for 124 yards. His volume, of course, is largely dependent on the status of Brandon Cooks and Nico Collins. But any week where both of those guys, or even one of those guys sit out, I think Chris Moore can be flexed in the playoffs here. And then this is a little bit more of a high upside guy, but I know a lot of people, this left a bad taste in a lot of people's mouths, because if you drafted Elijah Moore, you're not in the playoffs probably, given the stock. I mean, yeah, you could probably work your way around that. Yeah. But, I used probably a 4th or 5th round pick in a 14-team league, and it just killed me. And I cut him, of course. But now he's back. And Corey Davis also suffered a concussion, which, again, that's almost a lock for a missed game here. So, again, it's a little dependent if Mike White is playing. I'm less excited maybe if it's Flacco or Wilson. But as long as Mike White's out there, he gets the Lions this week, Jacksonville, Seattle. Great rest of season schedule. I think we could see something out of Elijah Moore.
Just Lions, Jaguars, Seahawks to end the year. Let's go. Mike White, QB1, rest of the way. I'm convinced of it. Please be healthy. I need this to occur because those Jets' offensive weapons are there, and the defense obviously is good. It'd be really curious to see how the juggernaut Lions offense handles a great Jets defense. Neither of those things I would have ever thought I'd say in the middle of December when we were doing the show to begin, end of July or whatever else it is. Okay, so those were the guys that you consider starting this week.
You can pallet starting those guys if you have to in a flex position or a wide receiver.
So who's the ones that I'm plugging my nose on and just diving in deep into this list?
Yeah, so if you have to, I throw Jameson Williams out there because he's 36% rostered and is steadily getting more involved. He's an upside guy, but 19.1% of his snaps, and I don't know if he still was on that special teams work, but that's a little discouraging for me, so I'm not as in on him. We do have to think about Trent Irwin from the Bengals. I have to say from the Bengals because you probably don't know who Trent Irwin is. He had a season high 83.6% of snaps with T. Higgins and Tyler Boyd dealing with hamstring and finger injuries, respectively. Only 2 targets for Irwin, but 1 went for a long score. He is somehow, with Hayden Hurst still bang up, does he end up wide receiver 2 in that offense with Joe Burrow? They'll pump 20 targets to Chase, but someone's got to come next, right?
Yeah. If Hayden Hurst continues, right? He was out this past week, or did he finally come back?
He was out this past week. I actually kind of like the chance. He's got a nice matchup and rest of the season schedule picking him up, but I don't want to spoil the tight end section here. Of course, we haven't talked about Deebo Samuel much. He's got an ankle sprain and an MCL sprain. That's not good. Expected to return at some point during the regular season.
That's a joke. There's no way.
That's going to be this is almost the Kyler Murray situation when he was getting carted off on Sunday. The mood, the vibe, the whole situation was just not good. So I would argue that you could probably drop Deebo if you were really in a crunch. You really want to hang around to have a banged up limited guy in your fantasy championship?
Yeah. The 49ers have either the 2 or 3 seed locked up. There's no reason for them to be doing anything else, especially with their skill guys. To rush Deebo back could be a mistake. I agree with you. I think he is a drop candidate for sure.
Yeah, the tough part is there's no easy replacement, as is often the case with wide receivers. Obviously, Ayuk's stock skyrockets. I was thinking about the Ayuk and Rally team name in my head again whenever I bring him up now. But you look at the rest of that wide receiver depth chart, Ray McLeod, Juwan Jennings, they were the snap beneficiaries, but really not a ton of interest there given the Brock Purdy / whoever the backup is, Josh Johnson.
Yep.
Yeah, something like that. So the one thing is Ray McLeod did get 3 carries. So
which is that Debo role.
Which is kind of that Debo role. So if Ray is going to step in and get some of those carries like Debo, that makes me slightly more interested in. But again, we're throwing darts here. It's a long shot.
No, I agree. It's a hard spot to be in. Same for a guy like Kendall Hinton for the receiver for the Broncos.
Yeah.
Especially if you have Brett Ripien as your QB instead of Russell Wilson.
Well, the problem is that Hinton, after Sutton is out and after Hamler's out, Hinton suddenly gets on the radar, right? But he also came away with a hamstring injury. He did play 86% of snaps, so good for him. No other receiver, besides him and Judy had more than 13% of snaps, so it's a 2 wide receiver set situation. But if Sutton doesn't come back, I think Dulcich and the tight ends, the whole group gets more targets. So I'm not necessarily jumping on Hinton. But if Hinton is healthy enough to play, I could see taking a stab at him.
Probably the best name of this group is Ben Skronik, who had 100% of the snaps. Looked pretty darn okay with Baker Mayfield and gets the Joe Barry Packers defense this week. I think Ben Skronik is a play this week if I had to in a 14-team league.
See, there are 2 things working for him, or 3 things really. 1, he's only 3% rostered, so he's out there. 2, he played 100% of the snaps. And 3, he had 8 targets, caught 7 of them for 89 yards. So he's definitely interesting. I don't want to mess around and play this roulette wheel with Skronik, Tutu Atwell, and Van Jefferson. I thought Van Jefferson would be the guy due to his draft profile.
Okay.
But he was only 4 targets, I think, compared to 9 for Tutu and 8 for Skronik. So he saved. Basically, Van Jefferson was on track for a dreadful fantasy day until he caught the game-winning score. Obviously, you can't just say, well, if you take away his one best play, he sucked. That's cheap, lazy analysis there. But I was. I was nervous. My biggest decision this week across many leagues due to buys was Van Jefferson or Donovan Peoples-Jones. Unfortunately, I went with my boy who ended up getting the volume to overtake Jefferson. But I don't trust starting any of these guys. I really don't. One of them will probably have a good game. And if you go by targets and snap share, I guess Skronik is there. But the Rams the game flow of that was they were behind essentially the entirety of the contest.
What do you think's happening against the Packers?
I don't know. How much do you trust the Packers? It could be a little bit closer.
I think that defense is the worst in the league, and they will allow points to anybody and production to anybody, and it doesn't matter.
I'm not ready to be that self-loathing. I just think Cam Akers is going to get more involved in the game plan. Baker Mayfield's going to throw a lot less passes, and Cam Akers is going to get a lot more carries because the real weakness of this Packers defense is the run stopping.
Yes, to an effect. I guess I would counter. Wouldn't we have said that same thing about Derrick Henry against the Titans game? Well, they decide, oh no, I mean everyone else sucks on the Titans. We're going to shut them down, and that's when Treylon Burks dunks on Jair Alexander and Ryan Tannehill goes off. Baker is not nearly as talented, nor do I think the scheme is correct. So you're right. Cam Akers was going to get at least 15 carries, even if he's not effective. But the slot receivers, Ben Skronik, Tutu Atwell, I will. That is a Culver's board, but I will feel confident saying Ben Skronik in a 12-team league can be a wide receiver 3.
I mean, who do you want to put him up against? Peoples-Jones?
I guess I would put him up against. Yeah, none of those guys. I would just put him in that list. I would move him up into. I'm not going to play him.
All right, so there we go.
I do all this stuff.
Let's move on to some tight ends.
Before we do, let's get a word from our sponsors. Monkey Knife Fight Football is officially back and has been all season long. A Monkey Knife Fight with all the NFL action you are looking for, and if college football is more of your speed, why wouldn't it be? They got plenty of that too. A Monkey Knife Fight. There's no sharks, no salary caps, no math. It's easy to play, easy to win. Daily fantasy player props. Join now at monkeyknifefight.com and you'll get your first game free. Then use promo code RWNFL to get your first deposit matched instantly up to $100. What are you waiting for? Join Monkey Knife Fight today. Jake, what are you waiting for? Let's talk about the tight ends that we got correct this past week.
Yeah, I know. I mentioned a lot of Chigi last week, and he looked great. He went out. He
Titans
had a great
tight
game.
end. The people are not going to understand what we're talking about.
Chigi Okonkwo. Sorry.
Yes.
Chigi Zoa. I'm sorry. I didn't catch that outside of red zone, and I think his touchdown came during my slight Sunday afternoon nap time. But
I think you just say Chig O, and everyone's going to figure it out.
Chigi O.
Yeah,
Chigi O. Yeah. Anyway, only 14% rostered. The thing is a lot of the allure of Chigi last week was Treylon Burks would be out, and they don't really love throwing to Robert Woods and Westbrook Akeen
for whatever the reason.
Yeah, for whatever reason, after spending all that money on Woods, it's basically your AJ Brown replacement. Anyway, I can dunk on them all day. Austin Hooper's still around, right? So we'll see. I want to look at the snap counts. I didn't look at that, leading up to this, but I think Chigi is absolutely on the radar. I mean, they saw what they had in him, and it was, just a skilled guy. Now, looking at these tight ends here, actually, the split here was encouraging: 51.6% for Hooper, 50% for Chigi. So 50% snap share in this 6 targets in this tight end landscape. Chigi's absolutely someone we definitely want to look at.
So I like him a lot, and I picked him up thinking I would use him in a few super flex leagues that never, or like tight end premium ones, didn't end up working out in my favor. That's fine. I don't think the Titans can put the genie back in the bottle. And you think about the Chargers, their run defense is bad, but maybe they overcommit to Derrick Henry like we have seen the past couple of weeks. The passing attack would theoretically be more involved. I also thought the Colts wouldn't put the genie back in the bottle for Jelani Woods. And yet he had 2 catches of 28 yards the week after and didn't get involved. And it was stupid Kylan Granson that was getting things. So
yeah, I guess we can re-mention Kylan Granson because they were on a bye and we just kind of noted that last week. So I guess if you're desperate, he could be a guy. The other one I wrote down here that I'm pretty interested in, even though we don't know because of this injury, is Hayden Hurst. And the reason I'm interested in that is a couple. He's got this calf injury, right? He keeps getting, even yesterday, Coach Zach Taylor called him week to week. And we learned Sunday that we can't trust any of Zach Taylor's injury reporting because I'm sure a lot of us, took zeros from T. Higgins this week. But in any case, Hayden Hurst is 41% rostered. I saw him dropped in a lot of transactions recently. The situation. T. Higgins has the hamstring injury. What's going to happen there? Tyler Boyd has the finger injury. What's going to happen there? I had mentioned Trent Irwin as a desperation wide receiver play, but if Hayden Hurst comes back, he's someone that Burrow has liked, and I would actually confidently start Hayden Hurst as a top 8 tight end.
I agree.
If you call him actives here. So 41% rostered week to week. The other thing is they have Tampa Bay this week, and they are 28 against opposing tight ends in standard formats. And then in week 16, they have the Patriots, who are 22 against opposing tight ends in standard formats. The Magic might run out against Buffalo in your fantasy championship game. But Hayden Hurst had to get a mention from me. Now, we could very well run into a situation where he'll be benched this week, and I don't feel great about Mitchell Wilcox or Devin Asiasi. Well, whatever.
You're good. He doesn't need to be mentioned. It's fine.
Sorry, Devin. Those are the guys. Anyone else you're looking at? Obviously, Evan Ingram had a huge game.
So that's the one I want to talk about. So Evan Ingram, right, 11 catches, 146 yards, 2 touchdowns. The 4 weeks or 3 weeks combined had 14 targets. So to get 14 this game alone feels odd. Now throw in the fact that you got the Cowboys this week. That's a really hard spot to say, oh, yeah, week 1 of fantasy playoffs, I'm going to play Evan Ingram. But you had mentioned the tight end landscape. Do you have a choice? Do you play Hayden Hurst over Evan Ingram after we just saw this past week?
If Hurst gets back on the practice field and is active, I think that is a very, very interesting thing. But I can't answer that right now because I need to see what the other wide receivers, what their injury status or their practice week
Higgins is back or not. Like if Higgins is available,
Higgins and or Boyd, there could be a situation where Hurst logs 1 limited practice Friday and then Higgins and Boyd are back, then I'm not interested. Then clearly it's Evan Ingram, but there's obviously a whole bunch of different dominoes could fall in another direction and make me interested in Evan Ingram. I mean, he looked good enough to be, we know what he can do in a game, and the floor, certainly there's a floor, but so does every other tight end. So I just looked it up. He's 56% rostered, just misses our cut, but he could, Chigi or Ingram? That's a question that you have to consider.
Man, now I have to think about the Chargers defense.
I don't know. I might be more inclined to play Ingram.
I think I got to play
going
Ingram
for
too.
Safety, but the fact that it's a conversation should tell us all.
Yeah. How about you tee up the defense's streaming options while I get the start-sit questions ready for us to end the show here?
Yeah. So the one that stood out to me is the New Orleans Saints. They're at home. They're only 25% rostered. They're coming off a bye, and they get the Falcons and Desmond Ridder.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, while Ridder could have a good game, this Falcons team has been decimated by injuries. Defense hasn't been the problem necessarily for the Saints, I would say, unless they're giving up, late game comebacks to Tom Brady.
Maybe Lattimore back as well, too. We've
been
waiting on that.
Absolutely. That could certainly be an issue. So I think they were the one that stood out the most. But I would also be a little bit interested in the Browns at 20%, depending on who starts for the Ravens at quarterback. That's one that I wouldn't submit a waiver claim for the Browns tonight because they'll probably still be out there Friday, Saturday when you're starting to make this decision and have more practice injury data to go by. Even maybe, I know you're going to hate me, but I'm going to think about the Packers on Monday Night Football. They're at home. They're off a bye. They get Baker Mayfield. I think the chances of a turnover and a poor Rams offensive line, I think there's enough. Maybe the Packers defense gives up 28, 35 points, but maybe they get a pick six and a couple of sacks. So, it evens out.
So the question is, Jake, do you want me to go to this game or not? Because if I go to the game, they'll lose and they'll lose horribly, and then you can't play the Packers defense. So
I don't know about you. I'm undefeated this year.
Oh, so we're gonna put our.
I guess I'll take your tickets.
I'm not convinced.
We traded
go on Monday. That's why I'm so have to really.
We traded our Monday Night Football, our Rams tickets for Cowboys tickets, so we could get 4 with the people next to us.
Right.
So of course Cowboys were awesome, and then I went with some other friends to the Patriots game. So I don't know. Lambeau Field's been nothing but beautiful.
So
nothing
are you
but
going
roses
to this
for
Rams
me.
game? You're saying you're not.
No, I'm not because we traded our tickets.
If I do go, that means they're going to lose.
So you're just going to give me your tickets then, right?
I'm not positive it works quite that way.
I will trade you both Minnesota and Detroit for your Rams tickets.
We already have them, Jake. This is the whole.
All right.
Okay.
Anyway,
so interesting
listener
enough.
questions. Let's do it.
I agree with you on the Packers part with the turnovers and sacks. The only issue is there's like 6 defenses because of all this quarterback attrition that I would say, oh yeah, I will play over Josh Johnson or Brett Ripien and when there are that many options, I will just default away from Joe Barry. That's my call. So
I mean, Denver fell below 50%. You could play them at home against Colt McCoy.
If you like McCoy as much as they do,
I do. I mean, I'm just throwing these other ones out here. So I mean, there are a lot of different. You could do the flip against that and take the Cardinals at Denver and Rapine, but I wouldn't do that. I don't think. There are a lot of options, and let's just face it, a lot of people are streaming. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers were a top 3 preseason ranked defense. They're probably going below 50%, if not close to it, because you can't trust them at all. You can't trust. I mean, Denver was another top one. They're below 50% now. There are a lot of teams opening up, but if you got the Bills or a solid team like that, or even the Patriots, you roll with your guys.
All right, are you ready for some questions here?
Yeah.
We've only got a couple, and I'm at some kind of trickling on the end. So this is kind of a 2-parter. So I'll have you answer it first this way. Who do you play this week? Justin Fields, Geno Smith, or Deshaun Watson?
Justin Fields,
Geno Smith, and Deshaun Watson.
Here, I got to get, if we're going to do these starter sit questions here on the Waiver Show, I got to get next week's schedule up real quick.
Yeah, it'll be, and we don't have Jeff's weekly rankings just yet. That's normally my get out free card is.
All right, so I mean, my gut feeling is to play Justin Fields without even looking at the matchups.
I would agree as well to Geno Smith and Deshaun Watson. There's a reason I'm asking it this way because it's kind of a 2-parter.
Yeah, I don't think Watson is enough, has shown enough to really make it into that conversation here. So
yeah, he had the 1 touchdown, 33 rushing yards, 276 passing yards. At least he got involved a bit more, and I got the Ravens this week.
I would play I'd play Fields. I think that's my man. I wouldn't touch Geno Smith against the 49ers defense. Watson hasn't shown enough yet. And yes, the Eagles defense is good, but I could see the Bears playing from behind and Fields having to sling it out a little bit. So Fields is the call for that, and it's not even really that close for me.
I would agree with you. Pull up Geno's page, because this is going to be a lot more complicated. This person has has both J.K. Dobbins and Chris Moore on waivers, and they're thinking they need to pick up both players. Certainly Dobbins, which you had mentioned we need to grab, and I think you can make an argument for Chris Moore too. So do you drop Geno or Deshaun, or do you drop Dameon Pierce as well? You had mentioned maybe cutting Pierce as an option. Those are 3 guys for those 2 players. They'd also say Gabe Davis. Don't drop Gabe Davis.
Don't drop Davis.
Dameon Pierce, Geno Smith.
Okay, so Watson's your first cut, I believe.
Okay, over Geno Smith.
Yeah, over Geno Smith. I'm looking rest of season. Geno's got a pretty nice matchup week 16 against the Chiefs, and then it's the Jets. And Watson, while I expect some slight improvement here over the next few weeks, and he's got a pretty nice schedule, the ceiling's not even close to being there. So you drop Watson first. I think I'd drop Watson for Dobbins. Should be your first claim, right? And then
do you pick up Chris Moore instead of Dameon Pierce? That's kind of the answer.
Does he need a flex? That's the question here. I don't love Chris Moore is a perfectly viable flex if those other guys are out, but he's not someone that I'm picking up thinking like his value is going to go down once those other guys come back, right? And there's no indication that they're going to miss the rest of the season or they'd have been put on IR. So if you need to start this week, I could see making that move. But otherwise, I would stick to just dropping Watson and adding Dobbins.
That's fair. All right, so here's a flex. Mike Williams against the Titans. Leonard Fournette against the Bengals, who are okay against running backs.
Mm-hmm.
Or Dobbins, I forget who against the Steelers. Who do they play this week? No, they just did that. Dobbins and the Ravens play. We had just talked about this. Now I'm blanking on it.
Yep. I'm trying to control offense now. They're at the Browns.
Okay, so Dobbins against the Browns, interesting. Fournette against the Bengals, or Mike Williams against the Titans, flex. I don't know if it's PPR or standard. That would kind of change things for me, but do the best you can.
I think it's going to be – I'm going to throw out Lenny because he's splitting time and the Bucs offense
I agree.
Pretty rough.
He's 3 for sure.
So it's coming down to J.K. Dobbins and
Mike Williams.
Against the
Titans.
It might depend a little bit on who ends up starting at quarterback for the Ravens.
Okay.
But I think Mike Williams is a little bit safer.
I'm going Mike Williams too, and I feel a bit more comfortable in you. I think it is the.
It's
right
so
call.
tight for me.
Yeah.
I guess maybe it was
okay
watching Dobbins on my bench last week and wanting to find ways to get him in there.
There's a clip out there right now, and I'm not sure if if you're listening to this, don't pull over to go look it up. But at the end of today, after you're like, oh man, we love J.K. Dobbins. There's a clip out there. Dobbins has breakaway run, should have easily gotten to the corner of the pylon for touchdown, is unable to do it. And not only is he unable to do it, he also doesn't really plant with his left foot to juke past the safety, which would have been a clear touchdown. Not that Dobbins is favoring anything. I don't feel like he doesn't seem confident in his body. And that was like you do that. Ohio State J.K. Dobbins, first-year Dobbins, does that very confidently and scores a touchdown. Just keep that in your mind. Just watch the clip.
Fold.
That's just watch that clip and tell me, oh, that's the guy that we are really convinced. He's worth picking up and worth playing if you need to, but you don't need to when you have Mike Williams.
Here, I got a personal flex question just for a little discussion here. J.K. Dobbins.
Yep.
Deontay Johnson.
Okay. Yep.
Or Chris Olave.
With Olave for sure.
Is it Olave? I mean, how much Olave are you exposed to? Because he has been pretty poor since Dalton took over. If suddenly they decided to start Jameis, I'm just saying Olave has not looked great, and Landry is back to siphon targets. They're throwing targets to the running backs.
So 26 targets over the last 4 weeks, and that's been with like the Steelers, Rams, Niners, Buccaneers. Yeah. It's the Falcons, though. Like I will play Chris Olave against the Falcons every single time.
What I'm saying is it's not just a layup here because I think Deontay, he has a pretty good matchup too. They're playing the Panthers, Deontay, and I think Deontay's better with
Trubisky.
And then, of course, there's Dobbins. So I'm going to pain myself over that. Actually, you know what? I have a first-round buy in that league, so never mind.
You're fine. Last question next week, for you, Jake, here. So Travis Etienne, we had mentioned they're going against the Cowboys this week. Zonovan Knight, I'm not I know they're going against a good matchup, but I'm not positive who the Zonovan Knights and the Jets are going against. Or Mike Evans.
They're going against the Lions.
Okay, so Zonovan against the Lions. That's interesting. Or Mike Evans, who has been a massive disappointment the past 3 weeks.
Mike Evans is just so inconsistent. I think you play Etienne.
Etienne against the Cowboys.
Yep.
Okay, so I might actually
his touches are guaranteed.
Okay, all right, that's fair enough. That does it for us on the Tuesday edition of the RotoWire NFL podcast, brought to you by No House Advantage. For those of you listening, hopefully we gave you some lineup questions, some thought process on what you need to do with your last roster spots as well.
Exactly.
First round bye guys.
Block your other teams.
Yes.
Block the other teams. Even if you have a bye this week, you should be considering picking players up.
Just like Jake, who's got 14 teams on the first round bye, he crushed it this season. Still be active on the waiver wire for that purpose only. And obviously for those of you who are playing in your first round plays, best of luck to everyone and best of luck to the fantasy season overall.